Great, okay. All right, so on the opposite side of the shoulders, we will do the same thing. And that is, we're putting 3 3/8 inches there and eight and a half centimeters. Yep, 3 3/8, yes. And 8.5 cm, great. Okay. And so on beneath that line, on all of them, let's put some numbers in terms of the number of stitches. So for the neckline, that's going to be 34 stitches. Right? So we've divided the 68 in half and put 34 stitches there. And on the outside is where we're going to put the selvage stitch. So on the side, just beneath the shoulder, just beneath the 8.5, yeah, we're going to put 17 plus 1 there. And that lets us know that we've got 17 stitches in our pattern, and we've got that plus 1 stitch that lets us know. The plus is always letting us know that we've got a selvage. And on the opposite side, Quinn, just under the shoulder, we're going to put 1, because that's going to be the last stitch, 1 plus 17 stitches. Yep, there you go, 1 plus 17. And so that's going to let us know that we've got 18 stitches there out on the edge. So when we add everything together, it's all going to come up to, of course, the 70 stitches that we have in that section. So, okay, so that's it for taking a look at our stitches and the width and all the different places that we're going to have stitch changes. This is called a working schematic. This is not the schematic that you would see in a magazine or a schematic that you would send away. It's your personal working schematic that lets you see how everything has unfolded, from looking at the measurements on your swatch to looking at the stitch measurements to looking at all the row measurements and the number of rows. And that's going to be something that you can directly knit from, or plan your pattern from. So let's go to the lengths. So the total length that I want for this garment, you'll see something happening on this schematic, and that is that I have a shoulder length that I want to stop at the shoulder, and then I have what's called a raglan depth length. And so you have your shoulders being shaped at the top. So let's go off to the left-hand side, Quinn, and let's fill out the total of everything is going to be 22 1/4. That for that big line, for that line there, 22 1/4 inches, and that's going to be 56.5 centimeters. Okay, and that is going to be 134 rows that we can put beneath that. 34. Yes. Yes, that's it. Okay. So then we're going to look at the next line, and that line is going to be at the very, very top. We want to shape the shoulders over 1 inch. So if we move up to the top, Quinn, the line just beside it, and the very top of that line, yes? There, let's put 1 inch there. Okay, and that's going to be 2.5 centimeters. And that's going to equal, just beneath that, we can put 6 rows. No, just 6 rows. That's okay. It doesn't matter. In parentheses, 6 rows. And we can move that right at the top, that tiny little piece at the very top of that line that's on the inside. Yeah, right there. Right there. That sort of populates there. Okay, great, good. And then let's move down, because now we've taken an inch out, so we know that we're going to have 21 1/4 inches that beneath that. Yes, 20 is going to be on that line. 20 beneath that on that line. Yes, it's going to be 21 and a quarter. That's going to be 54 centimeters. And that's going to be 128 rows. And beneath that, 128. Yes, okay, so we've got the total number of rows based on what we want as our desired length, based on 6 rows to an inch. The total inch is there. Then we're going to move over to the opposite side, and on that side we're going to start to look at what are we actually doing in terms of different sections, because we've got three different sections here. We've got up to the armholes, then we've got from the armhole to the neckline, then we've got from the neckline to the shoulder. That's up to our shoulders, and then we have the shoulder shaping. So we go up to the shoulder length first, and then we shape along that slope at the top of the body. So here, we're going to have a total in the armhole depth of 8¼ inches, which is that little line on the inside, Quentin, the little line on the inside of that side. Yep. Go in. You're on the outside line. Yep, it's on the inside line. There you go. Okay. So that's going to be 8¼ inches, and that's going to be 21 centimeters. And that's going to be 50 rows. Okay, and if we can make that come down so it stays inside, yes, exactly. All right, so let's go back up. We know that we had, at the top, let's just get that done. We know that we have 6 inches at the very top of that line, the outside line. Yes. So we know that we have 1 inch there that we're going to shape over. We see it on the opposite side. Okay. We know that that's 2.5 centimeters. Okay, and that's 6 rows that we're going to use for that. All right, so let's go down and say when we're coming from the bottom and we're knitting up to the armhole beginning, how much in terms of the number of inches, what am I using there? So we have 13 for the line at the very bottom here. Yeah, the bottom on that, yes, the only line that's left out on the left.
Sorry, Julie, which line am I going to you?
Where you were before at the top, we're going to the bottom now, up to that first break.
Okay.
Come down.
Okay, I'm down here.
No, right there. There you go. Right, that's where we're going. That's the
Got it.
very first break. We need 13 inches there. That's 38 centimeters. And that's 78 rows. Great. All right, so now between the end of the garment, the beginning to the beginning of the armhole, we have a length, pardon me, that has to be worked up to the neckline. We've got a total between the armhole beginning and the shoulder, but within that length, then we have the neckline that comes in. So what do we have there? So just above that, Quinn, where you just wrote the 13, yes, in that area, let's put 5¾ and I'll explain why. That's 15. That's 15 centimeters, and that's 34 rows. Okay, and where you put the 1 inch there at the top, and you brought the rest of it down. We're going to have to put that out horizontally. Let that, because we've got a space in there to fill in. Yeah, that's great. Okay, yes, because we have 8¼ inches as the total up to the armhole, up to the shoulder shaping, pardon me, minus, we have 5¾ inches there between the top of the, we have, 34 rows between the top of the armhole beginning and the neck. And then so we're going to subtract one from the other. We have a neck depth of 2½ inches. So we're going to put 2½ inches there, right where your cursor is. Yep. That's going to be 6 centimeters. And that's going to be 16 rows. Yeah. All right, so what we're looking at now is what we've got, and the reason we want in our neckline, we want 3½ inches as a neck depth. So for a high round neck line, it's usually somewhere between 2 and 3½ inches. Any deeper, you start to get into, just more of a deeper neckline, a more scooped, we call a scooped neckline. So here we've got a high round. We want 3½ inches in our neckline. And what we have to remember is that if we want 3½ inches in this neckline and we're adding, and you always want to remember this so you don't end up with a scoop, we're adding an inch as we shape our shoulders, then we don't have to make that neckline 3½ inches, because as we continue to add fabric and rows to shape the shoulders, the neckline's going to come down that extra inch. So you will have a 3½ inch neck depth there. Okay, so now we're looking at all the numbers and we say, how do we get started? And we are saying, okay, so we will, first of all, are there any questions? No questions? Okay. So we're going to work even. We're going to cast on 90 stitches. We're going to work even to the armholes. And then we're going to shape our armholes. So at the armhole, we're taking out 2 stitches on 2 inches on each side. So we're taking out 10 stitches on each side of that armhole. We want to start off by shaping the armhole gently, which means we can take off a 1/2 inch to 3/4, but usually about a 1/2 inch. Sometimes on certain types of garments, you may take off an inch. But here we're going to do a gentle slope. We're going to take off a 1/2 inch. And we're going to shape over, usually you're going to shape somewhere between 1½ inches and 3 inches. That's going to be the length of your armhole shaping. That's the depth of the line that you're going to use. Here we're going to use 2 inches. So if we look up and we have 6 inches, 6 rows equals 1 inch, we know we're going to use 12 rows in our armhole shaping. And so just out to the side, below the 13, where you've got it there, Quinn, yeah, just in there, because it's an empty space, you can move it over even a little bit more. We're just going to put the armhole shaping, and that's going to be 3, and then a comma, yeah, and then 2, and then 2, and then 1, 1, 1. It's just 1, 2, I mean 2 2s, pardon me, 3, 2, 2, yeah, there you go, 1, 1, 1. So that's going to happen on each side, and we can actually write armhole above that if you can, just above what you've just written, okay? 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, okay? And then just above that, can you write the word armhole? A-R-M-H-O-L-E, there you go. And yes, the same thing on the opposite side. So we have 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. We see that pretty much laid out for us. So we've cast on 90 stitches. We've worked even for 78 rows. And now we're at the armhole shaping. And just from looking at the way we've written it, it's going to say, ending on the next right side row, on the next wrong, with the next wrong side row. So then you'd say beginning on the following right side row, shape armhole as follows. Bind off 3 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows, because we're working flat, 2 stitches at the beginning of the following 4 rows, and then 1 stitch at the beginning of the following 6 rows. And then we'll say, looking at what's going on that width line at the top, then we will say piece should measure, of course, first 13.5 inches, and plus we're moving on, so we'll add that in a second. Width should be 13.5 inches, or we'll have 70 stitches on our needles. Okay. So now there's something to think about after we have made the armhole, finished the armhole. We started out with having 50 rows between the beginning of the armhole and the neckline. So now we have used up 12 of those rows. So that's going to bring us down. But also, if we take a look at exactly how much that's going to bring us down in terms of the number of rows that we'll have remaining, we had 34 rows between the beginning of the armhole and the beginning of the neck shaping. We've used 12 of those, so we've got 22 more rows that we know that we're going to use before we get to the first neck shaping. If we look at what we have here, you know, we've got 5 3/4 inches, and we've got 13. So we're going to start our neck shaping when we have 18 3/4 inches there. Okay, and that's going to be 48 centimeters. So what we'd like to do is now say, okay, so we're going to work even for 22 rows, and then we're going to shape neck. How are we going to shape the neck? When we're looking at a high round, we're just going to divide it in thirds. So we have a third that we will shape on the sides, a third that we will take out in the center. So we're looking up, and we've got 34 stitches. We want to divide that by 3. We realize it won't happen. We take away one of those stitches, and it gives us 33. So we can have 11, 11, and 11. And if we had 11, 11, and 11, we will have one extra one. And any of the extra stitches you'll place in the center. So it's going to be 11 on one side of the neck that we're going to shape, 12 in the center, and 11 on the opposite side. So, you know, we're going to work across. We've got 18 stitches in the shoulder, plus we've got 11 stitches on the side. So we're going to work across 29 stitches to the center. So Quinn, let's put some numbers up there. Let's put 12 in the center, right at the bottom part of that neckline where it's flat. You're at the top. Come down to the bottom part of the neckline, and let's put 12 there. Yes, we can put it inside if you want, but right there, yeah, 12. That's good. Yes, and on that one side, let's put 11 on the side neck as it shapes up. Inside the inside as well. Bring it down a little bit more. Yep, exactly. That's good. And then 11 on the opposite side as well, inside the neckline. Yes. So that there, it lets us know exactly what we're doing with that front neckline. So let's lay out the way we're going to shape that neckline. We've come across, we know that we're going to go across to 17, and then we're going to go across to 11, and then we're going to bind off the 12. But how are we going to then gently shape that neckline? And we're going to do it by going over 12 rows. Here we could actually shape up to the 16th row, because what happens when you're shaping anything, whether it's your neckline or the top of your garment or the top of your sleeve, you never want to put your very last increase or any kind of decrease, whatever you're doing, increase if it's a sleeve, decreasing if it's inside the neckline. You don't want to do that at the very top, because that means you need that width that you figured out in your measurements, and you need it for comfort. That's why you've added the ease. And you don't want to just make it to that width and then that's where it is. You want to make it there, and then you want to add an inch. If it's the arm, if it's the shaping for your sleeve, you want to add 2 or 3 inches where you're going to work even, so you have that comfort there. Here at the top of the neckline, usually we leave a 1/2 inch or an inch. But because we are going to continue to work to shape the shoulders, then we could actually go to the 16, row 16, and then we're going to shape the shoulders. We would get an inch, but I'm going to stop it at 12 rows, and then we'll work even for the 16 rows. Also, if you multiply the 2.5 by the 6, you're going to get 15. We add the 16 because we have the rows paired, and rows are paired even and odd and even. So what I'd like to do is to just write this on, Quinn, if you could, just near where you have armhole, because there's a lot of space out there on the side. Yeah, that's fine. So you could write neck, neck shaping or neckline. Yeah, neck shaping, great. That's great. Neck shaping. And so that's going to be 3, 2, 2, 2, yes, and then 1, 1, 1. Okay. Yeah, just 2 ones, okay. So let's count that. That's 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. So that's the way we're going to shape that. So we'll work across, we'll bind off the center 12 stitches, we'll work across to the edge, and then as we come back, we will start on that side, when we will be on the left-hand side, we will start binding off at the neck edge. When you reattach your yarn, and as you're shaping your armholes also, on page 77 in Knitwear Design Workshop, we talk about a slope bind off. So here, since we're at the neckline, I'm going to talk for 2 seconds about that. And that is when you reattach your yarn to go back to, remember you've come across the right side row. You're going to now, when you go back to work on that right-hand side of your garment, you're going to be on the wrong side row. So in order to get a slope and not a stair step, then we're going to ask you to just practice and think about just slipping this first stitch and binding off, and then working the stitch and binding off from that point forward. So that would be the first of the 3 when you're coming back across. When we're looking at the armholes, it's the same thing. The first bind off is the bind off. That's the start of everything. But the second bind off, you have the possibility of getting stair steps, which you don't want, especially when you're seaming. When you're trying to do, every time you have a stair step, and lots of times at the neckline, it's a chance to get holes, and you don't want holes in your garment, and it's because we're actually working the stitches. When I say working the stitches, and that is each time you work a stitch and you go over that needle, you get a different height. That's how your garment grows. If you don't want any height, and you want either the stitches to pull up more closely to one another or the rows to pull up more closely to one another, you just slip. And sometimes we even do slip bind offs if we want something to stay very tight as we're binding off. So at the top, here we're going to do what's called a slope bind off, because we're binding off one at a time in order to shape. We're not doing a total bind off of a piece. So each time you come back across that row with the armhole, you've finished 3, now you're coming back. You don't work that last stitch on the row before. And on the very first, that's still on your needles, as you come back across, the very first stitch you will slip and bind off. And what that does is it pulls the rows up. You'll have just a little bit of elongation because you're spanning 2 rows with that one stitch, but you'll get a very neat, very, very neat curve that will look more like a sewn piece of fabric or a garment than with the knitting with the stair steps. Okay, so that's pretty much, we're finished going up to the neckline. So finishing the neckline, now we're at the shoulders, and we've reached the top of the shoulders, but we're going to shape the shoulders now. So when the piece measures 16, when the piece measures, where are we? 21¼ inches. And we've got that 1 inch that we wanted. We're at the shoulders now. We're then going to shape shoulders. So we shape the neckline. We finish the 12 rows. We're going to work even, both until we have this total number of 16 rows on both sides of our piece. Of course, one side will end earlier than the other because of just the way it works when you're on the right side or the wrong side. And we're increasing. So now we've reached the shoulder shaping. And we're going to bind off doing the same thing. We're going to do a slope, leaving that last stitch and just not working it. If we want to have all the stitches bound off, we're going to bind off 6 stitches 3 times. And we're going to do that on both sides, and that's going to be the finish of our front. So if we don't want to bind off, but we'd like to do a 3-needle bind off, then what we'll do is use decreasing short rows. Increasing short rows would take you out. We're going to use decreasing short rows, which means that we would actually just, wrap and turn. So we deactivate the stitches, but they are not bound off. And then at the end, we hide the short rows, we hide the wraps, and then we can do a 3-needle bind off. So you have either option, but either way, it would be 6, 6, and 6. So we've finished our entire garment in the front. We now have the back to do and the back neck to do. So are there any questions at this point? Okay. So now we'll do the back neck, the back of our garment. We'll work it the same way. We'll work everything identically up to the armholes. And then from the armhole to the back neck, to the beginning of the shoulder shaping and the back neck shaping are going to be done at the same time. So then we're going to continue to work even because we don't have that front neckline that has to come in at any point, and we don't have to plan for that. So we're going to shape our armholes after we get to 13 inches. We're going to continue working for the 50 rows, which is another 8 1/4 inches. And then, we will have, after we shape the armholes and we've used up the 12 rows, then we're going to have, the remaining rows to shape up to the beginning of the shoulder shaping. So that's going to be important. What else? Okay, so when we're looking at the back neck, the back neckline, it's going to be worked a little bit differently. We've got 34 stitches in the total neckline. We're going to start by taking, because we're not going to take a big depth for the back neckline. The back neckline, I explained, is just shaping so that the back of your garment, we're not shaped like a square in the back. Like our shoulders are not square. If we put on a garment, of course, it will lie that way, but we can also do some details to make that work. We have a curve, like a little curvature back there. And just shaping the back neckline just a little teeny bit will make that fabric curve around and follow the natural curve of the body. So here we're going to shape, just shape over two little steps, and that's going to be over about 4 rows. What I'd like to do is to start by taking out 50%, instead of a third, or 33 and a third percent, we're going to take out 50% of the neckline stitches right away. We're going to bind those off. So we're going to come across the 18 stitches, right, and then we would be binding off the center. The center, what? We have 34. If we divide that in half, it's going to be 17. And then if we did that, we would have not an even number on both sides. So we'll put 18 in the center. 18 at the back next, Quinn, at the top of that. Yeah, you can put it right, yeah, above it, slightly above it. It will be 18. And then on either side, we'll have 16 stitches then remaining, 18 from 34. We're going to put those stitches on both sides. We'll divide that in half, and we'll have 8 on where we have, just above where you have the 11. Let's put an 8 over there, on both sides. Yes. So that's going to be 8, and then on the opposite side, it will be 8 as well. And we will divide that on into 2 levels, and so we will have 4 and 4. So let's just put an 8 out there. Yeah, there you go. So we have 8, and then we have 18, and then we have 8, and we have 4, and then 4, and then we would have 18 in the center, And so we would work across the 18 stitches for the shoulders, right or not. We would be working across, actually, what are we going to do? We're going to cast off 16, right? We're going to bind off 6 stitches. And then we're going to work across to that center. So we'll have 12 stitches there remaining of that 18. And then we have 8. So we will bind off 6, we'll work across 20 to the center, okay? And then we would bind off the 18 and continue on the opposite side and come back, and we're going to bind off, if we can just put somewhere, we'll put back neck shaping. We can put, just put back neck. Yeah, that's fine. Put it over there, back neck. And then we can put 4 and a comma and 4. Yeah, there you go. So it would be working across to the center 18, working across, and then we would bind off 6 stitches on the opposite side, come into the inside, bind off 4, back out, bind off 6 more, bind off 4, bind off 6 more. The same thing. So we'd have 2 steps of 4 on the inside of that back neck and 3 steps of 6 on the outside. Reattach on the opposite side, and then we've got the first 4 that we would, because we're coming back on the inner neck now, we'd bind off the first 4 there, back out again to the edge, bind off the second 6, back in again, bind off the second 4, back out again, bind off the third 6. And when both pieces measure 22 1/4 inches, which is 134 rows, when that's been worked, then everything's bound off. And that's the total of the back and the front, and working a classic, your classic body schematic. We're planning this for a set-in sleeve. We're going to work through just doing a regular sleeve that would be more for dropped, but up to the point where we would put a cap in. We're going to work through that today, and then later we'll do the cap. But are there any questions here? Okay. Then we'll move to the next slide.
Shirley, sorry to interrupt. For the back neck shaping, for the front neck, we put the extra stitch back in the center. Do we not do the same thing for the back neck?
Yes, that's what you did on the back neck. We had 17. When we divided it in half, it wasn't going to be even.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you.
We would put 18 in the center so that we would have 16 on both sides. But we'd have 16 divided in half, we'd have 8 on both sides. And then we
Okay.
got our levels, which was, we wanted 2 levels. If you wanted more levels, you might take off 2 to, whatever, to get up to 8. But here we wanted just 2 levels. And you could actually do one level if you wanted to do that. But yes, we have done that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so next, this is a look at it. It's like at a glance, and what we see is we see the front neckline here, and we see that we divided it by 3. We see the total number, and these will be, in your handouts. And we see, where the even rows are and the odd rows, and the number of stitches that were decreased as they line up there. And then we actually follow the grid there. And it's a 34 stitches in our neck opening. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Then, of course, this is the back. And you see the back shaping where we've shaped the shoulders. So we have 3 sets of 6 for our 18 stitches that we had remaining on the outside. And we also have the 18 as the center, and we have the 2 sets of 4, which are 8 stitches on each side, and we wanted those 2 levels. So we're using up actually 5 rows total on that, 4 rows, and then we have the extra one on the opposite side. And so there you go. All right, and in the center you see everything. What's at the center neck, what's at the shoulders, what's at the side neck. So this is just at a glance to see, and this is the way you can just take out a piece of charting paper or do it online just to lay out what's happening on your garment. And so if any time you run into anything while you're knitting, you can always go back to this and say, what did I write here? It's a type of a worksheet for you. All right, next. There's something else to consider when you are laying out your garments, and that is beyond just the plain measurements. We are working with some type of pattern stitch usually. We want to be very vigilant and very aware of pattern stitch flow, and we want to practice it on our swatches usually. Like, what is our garment going to look like on the sides? In Knit Wear Design Workshop, I have one page where I outline pattern flow for a cardigan, and it's a color cardigan. And it's because we want to see, like, where's that pattern going to break at the sides? We want to know what's going to run along the armholes. We also want to know what's going to happen at the neckline. So we keep everything very beautiful. Also, if by shaping the shoulders we're going to break that pattern, then we'll bind off flat. But we also want to say what happens at the shoulders with our patterns, and that's the key. As everything comes together, touches at the shoulders, how does it run back, down the front, and down the back? So up, touch, and watching the pattern flow back down. When we put our arms down, does that pattern flow across the body very evenly? All those things are very important. And starting to be very aware of pattern flow is where it starts. So next. So here you see at the bottom that we have the 90 stitches, as we know, 88 plus 2. I keep reminding myself all the time because we could forget that I've got extra stitches in there. Every single thing that I've got there, I've got my selvages there. It's all there because I've got to work with it. So as we look and we see, the 8s going across, I've got eight stitches in each multiple. And I've also got a multiple of 14 rows. So I'm aware of that. And I'm seeing that what's going to happen at the bottom when I'm casting on, and then as I go into my cross back, what happens, and then what happens when I separate my shoulders and my neck. It's not just stockinette. Many times we have a pattern stitch. We want to be sure that we're going to have a beautiful garment there. So if we just look at the bottom, and we know that we've got 90 and we've got 70 that we, between the cast on and the cross back, we know we've got 20 stitches that have to come out with 10 on each side. The selvage is the first thing that has to come out, but we're going to reestablish that. So we have the selvage and we have the 8 coming out on that side, for example, on both sides. That gives me 9. Then I have an 8 here that I have to take out a stitch from, okay? So that becomes 7. But when we move up to the next realm, when we actually, during the cross back, we reestablish the selvage, and then that 8 becomes 6 and the selvage on both sides. And then as we move up into the neckline, you see the little dots that say, okay, we see the center 8. Part of that has to go toward the shoulder, and part of it has to go toward the neck based on our calculations. So just keeping an idea of what's happening with pattern flow. Also, because I have, based on the length that I want of that 22¼ inches or the 56.5 centimeters, then and based on my gauge of 6 rows to an inch, then I'm going to end on, I need 134 rows, I'm going to end on a half of a rep. So I want to make sure that when I end on that half of a rep, what's going to happen at that shoulders? Is that a good place to end? Maybe I want to shorten my garment, maybe I want to make it just a little bit longer, or whatever. I just want to end on a place that's going to look really beautiful when everything is seen together. Okay, so next. We go to the next page. Quinn? Okay, so you see that I'm doing the multiplication and I'm seeing, exactly what's going to happen here. 14 times 9, and then, I've got 9 reps there, and then it's going to let me end on a half. And those are all the things that I'm working through in my mind as I'm planning my garment. Okay, next. So this is what it looks like at the end of the day. This is what my working schematic will look like. Everything that we did, the way we shaped the neckline, the way we shaped the armholes, the number of stitches that came out from the armholes, the stitches in the center of the back neck, the front neck, the side stitches, everything here is written here. One glance and I could see it all. And also, the total number that I have at the top of my garment, the total number in my neckline, the total number at the bottom, all the selvage stitches, everything on this piece is accounted for. And then I can make whatever decisions I need to make from here. All right, next. All right, we continue, and this is just a continuation of just looking at everything that went into it. All right, next. So what we've done here is given you a template, and that will allow you to use the same numbers, or you can, of course, it's blank, so you can then use it for your numbers as well, change it as well, add whatever else you need to add into it. But this is just a beginning step for the classic body, and just walking you through, the needle size, how far are we going to walk in step 2 without shaping, what row is the armhole shaping going to begin on, and then telling me, what's the first cast off for the armhole going to look like. And then just moving into the next page, it continues walking you through all the things that you want to write down based on your working schematic. And then next page. Okay, and then the next page will continue. This is the answer sheet for that particular garment. Okay, next page. And it continues. All right, so that's the end of the classic body. And at the end of it all, in your handouts, you will have that template that you can work with, and then you'll have the answer sheet. So that may be a good place for starting. And then you can make a copy of the template and do whatever you need to do for your classic body. Here, I just put a picture of what a drop shoulder looks like, because some of you said you wanted to do drop shoulders. And the difference is that you don't take out any width from the bust measurement. You continue straight to the shoulders, which of course it comes in a little bit wider than the shoulder, and that's why it will drop off the shoulders. So you would do the same thing. You'd work your schematic would have you working up to the neckline, and then planning the neckline, and you can shape the shoulders if you want. And also for your sleeve, it doesn't have to be double the armhole depth that you want. It can be whatever you want. So you can actually make the sleeve a little tighter if you want at the top. Whatever, it's your piece. And the fabric is, you don't have to set the sleeve into anything. But we do see that we start with the wrist measurement, of course, and then we have 2 different types of stitch patterns at the bottom. We've got the ribbing, and then we move into the actual pattern that we're using. So I'm going to walk you through being able to do that. At the top, you see that I've left on this side, I've left 2 inches, and that is generally what you want to do. You'll shape, and then you'll leave the 2 inches, as I said before. Okay, so this is just a look at that. And then if we go forward, Quinn.
I think Joanna raised her hand for a question.
Okay.
Joanna?
Yes?
You there, Joanna?
Okay, we can come back. Let's keep going. Right, so does anyone need a break? We just planned this in because after taking in all the information from the classic body, we thought you might need it. If you don't, we're going to just keep going. Okay, let's keep going. All right.
Shirley, a couple of people did ask for a break, so maybe
Okay, so let's take 5 minutes then.
we should do that.
All right. We've got a video that's going to play in the background, just a recap of the kickoff calls. As soon as it stops playing, it's around 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes. If everyone can start getting back to their seats and getting ready after the 10-minute break.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Konnichiwa.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd just like to welcome everyone to
Hi. When do you realize that the sound went off?
Up with the rest of the pack and reach the certain milestones and keep within the parameters.
今の質問。
Hi, everybody.
こんにちは。
Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd just like to welcome everyone to the meeting as well as to the DAL. It's a judged competition, cables, color, and lace. So let's talk about creating a profile, and that is creating a personality for your garment. But just taking the time to sketch your thoughts, swatch different patterns, make sure that you're ready to go. The DAL's coaching team, these people are more than able to help you on your path. Yarns will be purchased from one of 3 DAL suppliers. So at this point, we'd like to know if you have any questions.
Is it like gradual elimination or is it elimination all at the end? What's the competition like?
It will be gradual eliminations. The judges who are judging at the end will come in pretty much so at the end.
It's really based upon if you're keeping up with the rest of the pack and reach the certain milestones and keep within the parameters.
今の質問ですが、コンテストはどのようにして人数を絞っていくのですかという話でした。だんだんに絞っていくんですが、ある程度いくつかの区切りがあって、そこで審査員に選んでもらったりします。最終的なのが3人に絞るのは割と大きなコンテストっていうのかな、大きな審査になると思います。
If one were to enter the competition segment and then not make it to the next round or whatever, could they then join the regular DAL as a participant? Because I sure wouldn't want to miss that.
The elimination means that you just are not competing anymore, but you're not eliminated from the DAL.
今エレンさんからの質問なんですが、コンテストに参加してで途中からやめたとか選ばれなかったらどうしたらいいのっていうことなんですが、これはレギュラーの DL の方に参加していただいて、そのまま続けて編んでいただいて、完成までいくという形でやっていけます。
The stitch patterns provided by yourself must be used within the garment. However, may we add our own stitch patterns in addition to that?
The basic part of it has to be with those patterns. You know, whenever you pick up a pattern stitch, how do I start at the bottom and make that flow into the actual pattern stitch, or how do I flow out? Do I deconstruct the stitch and add something? All of that is pretty much a part of the creative process, and so we do expect that.
今の質問ですが、ステッチパターンは自分で探してきたものは使えますかということなんですが、基本的にはこちらから提示したステッチパターンをベースに使っていただきます。ベースに使っていただくってことは、その要素が入ってればいいということですので、組み合わせとか、それからレースやケーブルの流れなんかはご自分で工夫なさってもらって結構です。
You talked about elements within the competition, lace, cable, colorwork. Can you combine from 2 different elements of those in a design for the competition, or do you really want to restrict it?
Just so long as most of it has the pattern category that we want it to be in. I don't want to restrict anyone's creativity. Many times I lead off my patterns with different elements in order to have them flow into the actual pattern stitch.
で今の質問ですが、コンテストの中で3人3カテゴリーで、1人ずつ、選ばれるということだったんですが、レースとケーブルとかケーブルと、カラーワークとか混ぜてもいいですかという質問でした。混ぜてもいいんですが、どちらかがメインになるような形にするのがいいのではないかということです。ただこれがまだはっきりわからないので、コンテストに参加する人たちは、コーチの人たちの意見とかなんかを聞いて少しずつ固めていくといいかと思います。
There's what, 5 design coaches? Do we get assigned to one, or is it kind of changes during the process, or how does that work?
They're going to be coaching in teams. I don't envision people switching around. And so, and we'll be working all together. If there's something that we all have to put our heads together to do, we're all back here to do that.
今の質問は、コーチが5人いるんですけども、どの人につくんでしょうかという話だったんですが、今のところだと全員がそれぞれグループでこう動いて皆さんにこうお話しできるような形になるのではないかということです。シャーリーは、こう全体を見る、スーパーバイズするという形になると思います。
Are there restrictions on what specific yarn we use for the competition, or may we choose anything that is carried by one of the 3 official yarn suppliers?
So the yarn that will be selected, there will be one yarn selected from each of the suppliers. One yarn for each category. One supplier's yarn will be for lace, one supplier's yarn will be for cables, and one supplier's yarn will be for color. And within that, we are going to select one yarn from that supplier and all the different colors. We have a finer weight for lace, and then we'll have a heavier weight, of course, a more worsted weight for cables, and then we'll have a medium range weight, a DK weight for color. You can purchase that yarn. If you're competing, you will have to use one of those yarns. And if you aren't competing, then you can use whatever you like.
ですね、指定の糸というのはどういうことでしょうかという質問だったんですけれども、3つの系統の会社からそれぞれ1種類別々の太さの糸を提供していただきます。で、合太、それから極太、それと合太と極太の間3種類の太さで1つの種類、3つのカテゴリーですよね。その中に合う糸を指定していただきます。で、その指定していただいた中の糸の中からお好きな色を選んでいただくということになります。で、まだあれなのかな、でこれは買っていただくことになると思いますが、ディスカウントが効くと思います。Okay.
Many thanks to everybody.
Okay. All right.
Good night. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everybody.
こんにちは。
Okay, are we ready to go? Everybody back? Okay. Okay, so it looks like everybody's back. Thanks for making it back on time. So we'll continue, and we'll look at the increase-decrease formula. This is on page 70 in Knitwear Design Workshop. And just to go over some of the parts of the division that you've all done years ago, as little ones probably. But we'll be using some of the terminology, so it's good to just refresh. So at the top, of course, is the answer for whatever we're dividing with. That's the quotient. Then we have the divisor. That's a number that's being divided into whatever's inside that division sign. And then whatever is left over is a remainder. However, with our stitches, it's not just a remainder. It's a number of stitches that we're going to have that we won't get across as we go across the row, or we go the number of rows that we won't be making increases or decreases on as we go up the sides of our garment. Here we're going to just take a look at 16 stitches that are being divided into 117 stitches. That means we need a 16 stitch increase. And so what we see is the answer, and then we multiply the answer by the divisor, the quotient by the divisor, and it gives us the remainder, and it tells us that when we go across a row, we're going to have 5 stitches remaining, but it will tell us how to get across the row, pretty much. That would be, if we just use that, it would be making 1 increase after working 7 stitches or on, depending on what kind of a technique you're using, and we'd be doing that 16 times. However, if we want to get it a little bit more close to what we need, and in a way that we go across the row that's in an interspersing way, so that's very evenly placing the increases or sometimes the decreases across the fabric, then we add 1 at the top, and what that does is that lets us go across the row in a way that intersperses 7 stitches, 8 stitches across the top, as we see. And at the bottom, we just take that number that's in the divisor and we subtract the remainder from it, and we use them both. We use both answers. Both of those numbers at the bottom will always add back up into the divisor because we've taken them away from that divisor. And we always do a math check. So here we would say, if we read that, we have the arrows pointing that will show you what you start with in the number of times. The cross, we always say, is the number of times. So how many stitches you're going to work across and the number of times you're going to do that, or how many rows you're going to work up, and or whatever, and the number of times that you're going to do that. So after you make one increase on or after every following 7th stitch 11 times, and then on or after every following 8 stitches, eighth stitch 5 times. That's what we would have here. We do the math check, and so 7 times 11 tells me we would have crossed 77 stitches. 8 times 5 is 40. We add it together. It tells us that 16 stitches will have been added, and we will have crossed 117 stitches to add those stitches in. So that's all that this formula tells you, just at a glance. And if you take a look in Knitwear Design Workshop, there's about 3 pages or 4 pages devoted to really just going through it. But we're going to go to the next page. We need to put it into a practical action. Okay, so here we have a sleeve cuff width, and this is what happens a lot because we want to be free in how we design, and not only at the cuff, but maybe in the middle of the garment or wherever. That we want to be able to add different types of pattern stitches if we want to. And so here we have, which is very standard or classic, we have a cuff that has a width of 11 inches. And then we have a body gauge of 9.12 stitches equals 1 inch, and we have a border gauge of 7.773 stitches equals 1 inch. So we look and we say, so how many stitches do we need if we multiply that border gauge by the 7.773, which is its stitch gauge? If we multiply that by the 11 inches, what do we need? So we need 85 stitches there for the body gauge, which is 9.12. Then for that 11 inches, we need 100 stitches. But we want those two fabrics coming together, and we want them to be the same width. So if we want that, then we have to increase 15 stitches across the row. Next, when the 2 stitches come together. So we can go to the next page, Quinn. All right, so this is the way, the formula. It looks a little bit long, and I'm going to go do 2 versions of it that give you 2 ideas of how to use it. But here is, I'm giving you the total explanation, and that is that we just start with 15 going into the 85, and we get 5. It'll go 5 times, and 5 times the 15 means that it's 75. So we have 10 stitches that would be remaining. So we subtract that 10 from the 15, and that gives us 5. We add the 1 at the top to the 6, and that gives us, the expanded, we call that the expanded quotient, and at the bottom, it's the expanded remainder. So we have the lines that would be crossing. If we just started with that, it would be 6 stitches 10 times and 5 stitches 5 times. Of course, you can see we're not going to just stop there. But if we just said, okay, 6 times 10 is 60, 5 times 5 is 25, 60 and 2 is 85. Okay, great. So we've done 15 stitches. We've added them into the 85. We now have 100 stitches on our needles. But we want to do it just a little bit more neatly and a little bit more methodically. And because we're making a fabric, this is our handmade artwork. And so we're taking our time to just look at how we do that. So here, I've taken one of the intervals. We call them intervals because each time you're stopping. And I call them interspersing intervals because it's like 6 and 5 and 6 and 5. So we're going to take one of them, which is the 6. After every 6 stitch, we're making the increase. We'll take one of those away. We'll put 3 stitches at the beginning, and we'll put 3 stitches at the end. And that's because when you use the formula exactly as it is, you go right to the last stitch. And we know that we don't want to be making increases or decreases on the very last stitch. So we try to get that balance, and we can do that very easily before we ever pick up our needles. So we take one of the 6 side, we divide it in half, 3 stitches at the beginning, 3 stitches at the end. And then we say, okay, so we'd like to have a number that will divide evenly into both of them, so we can get a ratio, a very even ratio. And so here I'm going to look at the opposite side and say, what are we doing on the 5 side after every 5th stitch? We're going to take away 2 and hold them to the side. Okay, we're using them because those are stitches we have, but we're doing different things. We're holding 2 to the side, which we'll put back in at the end. 2 5 intervals, and then we're going to take 1 6, and we're going to put 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. Just 1 second. All right, so why did we take away the 2 from the 5? We want to get a common denominator, meaning a number that will divide into both sides that will then make me have an interspersing increase ratio that will go very evenly across the fabric. And then by doing that, we get the number 3. And the number 3 actually will tell us that that's a number of times we're going to repeat whatever we're doing. As a double check, a math double check, we always can look at the bottom and say, okay, 3 will go into 9 3 times, 3 will go into itself once. So the ratio of 3 times stopping after every 6th stitch and making an increase to 1 time stopping after every 5th stitch it's going to be 3 to 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. On this side, each time we've done anything, we took 1 away. We started with 15, we took 1 away to put 3 at the front, 3 at the back. We came down, we took 2 away. We're holding all that. We're holding the 2 on the side, but we're making sure, like on the schematic, that everything we need to know is written and we have a paper trail to be able to go back and say, how did I do this? Because remember, many times, especially with designers, we may be doing 4 designs at the same time. So we have to take the time. I always say it's like getting into your car and driving to another place, whether it's another state, another city, whatever. You have to plan that out. So you say, now how am I going to get there? So here, this is always something for us to be able to come back to. So here on this side, out on the left side, we started by reminding ourselves we had 15 stitches. That's where we wanted to work out. All right, so we've taken out one set. Now we've taken out 2, so we've got 12 stitches that we're concerned with, and we'll handle the others when we're handling one at the beginning, at the end, and we're handling the next 2 at the end. We're going to take that away. We're going to do the same thing we did at the beginning, subtracting that remainder, that divisor that becomes the divisor, the altered divisor from the remainder. So it's going to be 9. 12 minus 9 leaves us with the 3. So that's a double check there. And then we find the common denominator. We find out that we can do 3 to 1. And all of this gives us the check. We go back for the math check. And we say, okay, so this is the way we're going to run our fabric, our increases. We're going to do after every 3 stitches 1 time. So that's our beginning. That's where we split that 6. Then after every 5th stitch 5 times. That's going to give us 25. And then after every 6th stitch 9 times is going to give us the 54. And then we've got the 3 at the end. And that is the first way of figuring it out. And we'll go to the next way in a moment. But Quinn, can we go forward? This is just a look at, and this is the way it'll be in your handout so that you can just get a closer look at everything that's happening, where we have A, B, C. So this is just A, dividing the interval in half, and you see that at the top where you see A1, and placing 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. So we're guiding you here. And then let's just go to the next one. And then here you see B, subtracting the appropriate amount of intervals from the other side to create a remainder that has a common denominator. And here in our example, it's 3, and so then we're going to divide it into our remainders, expanded remainders. And then you see C here, what the common denominator is. So all of this is here so that you will understand. I've explained it all, but you can go step by step. Right, next. All right, and that was when, how do we do the math double check, which was 3 to 1. We had the ratio of 3 to 1. We add 3 plus 1 gives us 4. What did we have as our remainder? It was 12. So 12 divided by 4 lets us know we're going to repeat this ratio 3 times. But as I said, the moment you find your common denominator, which is 3, then that's going to let you know that you're going to repeat whatever ratio you come up with 3 times. Okay, so let's move. And this is what your fabric would look like. And that is that we see the 3 in the green that we placed at the front and at the back, and it's color-coded. And then we see the 5s, and we see the 2 5s that we held aside together. And then we see them running around. Okay, so we see the count here on one side. If you start on the left, you see this is the line going across is separating the front from the back. And on the side, you see where we start with 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see every single up to 15 where we've interspersed and put those extra stitches in. And then you see we've put the 3 at the front and before we started, and then we left 3 at the end, and then we went around 5 and then 6, 6, 6, 5 and then 6, 6, 6. That was the interspersing way. And at the end, after we did the last 5, 6, 6, 6, we had 2 5s left that we put back in, and then we had the 3. And so you see exactly how everything will run around your fabric. Okay, next. With increases. So this is another way to do it that, you can do it the opposite way and really custom tailor the way you want to have your increases and decreases go across your fabric. Or you can do something simple, and that is that, okay, we know that the glitch in the formula is that it will take me across the row, but it'll stop at the very last stitch. So I'll take 5. Let me divide the 15 into the 85 and see what it's going to tell me that it's going to use as the first starting interval. So here it tells me right away 5. So I know I'm going to work across 5 stitches and then do an increase. So I'll use that 5 as what I'll put at the end right away. I'll just subtract it in terms of what I will divide into. So instead of dividing my 15 into 85, I just divide it into 80. And it tells me then on every 5th stitch, 10 times, you're going to make an increase, and then on or after every 6 stitch 5 times. And then I divide, whatever's a common denominator into that. If I want to get a more interspersing, I mean, you don't have to. You can just do that and you'll get your increases, and that'll be great. But if you want to do it so that you get a more evenly interspersing increase, then we will do the common denominator, which will be 5, which tells me that I'm going to repeat 5 times whatever I'm coming up with. And the ratio is going to be after every 6 stitch, I'm going to make on or after if you're knitting in the front and the back, or if you're knitting on the running thread between, that would determine on or after. But you're going to add 6 5 times, and then every 5th, you're going to do that 10 times. And so here we have a math check and the numbers correspond. They're circles. The colors of the circles correspond with what you would be doing in terms of multiplying. So we have 5 times 10. So after every fifth stitch, or after every 5th stitch 10 times, that gives us 50 stitches that we've covered. And then on or after every 6th stitch 5 times gives me 30 stitches that we've covered. So 10 and 5 is 15 total stitches that we've put in, and 50 and 30 are 80. And now I have the 5 that I kept out, and I let those stitches will be still on my needles at the end. My last increase will have happened 5 stitches before the end. My first increase will have happened 5 stitches after I started. And so we'll have that balance on the end, and then we'll have the increases running across the fabric. So that's that. That's an easy way to do that. So that's increases. That's option 2 on your ratio tool. I call the interspersing increasing, decreasing the ratio tool, because we try to get an even ratio as we go across. So Quinn, we can go to the next. And this is just a flow. You see that example A, 15 decreased on 85 stitches, and you see how that lays out. At the top you see the number of stitches, and you see how many stitches were added and how. You see the 3s at both ends, you see the 5s, 2 5s at the end here, and then you see the 5 6 6 6s running across, so you can very easily understand what's going on here. And then on the second one we have 15 stitches added into 80 stitches. And so we run across to 15, and then you see the plus 5 on the end. So that brings us, we go across 80, and then we have 85. So there, we've done it. We've added the 15 into the 85 stitches. All right, so next. So the next is decreases. So what if we had 100 stitches on the needles, and we needed to take 15 stitches away, versus we having 85 on the needles and having to add 15. And so we start with the exact way that we did before, just dividing the 15 into the 100. But we have to remember that if we're decreasing, we are knitting 2 stitches together, right, to bring that count down on each side. So when we see 6, every 6th stitch 5 times, what that actually means is when you're going to knit together every 5th and 6th stitch 5 times. And then when you see 7th, it means when you're going to knit together every 6th and 7th stitch 5 times. So you would have to say knit 4, knit 2 together for the 5th and 6th stitches for the 6th stitch side. And then when you would have to say knit 5, knit 2 together, that's the 6th and 7th stitch for the 7th stitch side. That means when you see 6 or 7, that's the ultimate stitch. And the one before that, you're going to have to knit that with that to bring that count down. So that's the big difference to remember. Everything else stays the same. 6 times 5 is 30, 7 times 10 is 70, so we have 15 and we've got 100. That we have 15, we've made 15 decreases on those 100 stitches that we've gone across. And then we've got a common denominator here, it's 5, so the ratio is going to be 2 to 1. 5 into 10 twice, 5 will go into itself 1 time. And so we know that we're going to repeat that 5 times. So we have knit 5, knit 2 together. Right, that's the 7th side. We know 7 stitches are involved in that movement. We're going to do that 2 times because we see the ratio coming down where the ratio says 2 7s to 1 6. And then we say knit 4 and knit 2 together. We just do that once. And we're going to repeat that 5 times. So we see, I have it here, this is all for you to read and go through and understand it. 7 stitches decrease to 6 here. So we have 6 times 2 would be 12, plus the 5 would give me 5, plus the 5 times 1, looking at the ratios. That would give me 17. Multiplying that by 5 is going to give me 85 stitches. So here, each time I just lay it out, so you say knit 4, knit 2 together, 6 reduced to 5, and over on the extreme left, knit 5, knit 2 together, 7 reduced to 6. And so this is just a way of totally making sure, math, the numbers could be right tonight, and especially if you're tired and wake up in the morning and you say, like, who did these numbers? They could be wrong in the morning. But just making sure that you can always go back and have a visual and be able to follow a train of thought that makes sense, and making the adjustments until it's correct, because this is what you can plan your knitting from. Okay, next, Quinn. And this is just a run out again of how it works. If so, the number of stitches decreased at the top, we've got it adding up to 15. The interspersing ratios, we show you if we want to look at the count of what we're starting with, which is 7s and 6s. So that would be 7, 7, 6. So we've got 2 7s to 1 6. That's going across the row. And then we have the final count, which is when we've actually knit those 2 together on each time. And we've got 5 times. We're going to do 6, 6, 5. That's what it's going to become. And that's going to mean 85 stitches. So it's all just to double check and all just to keep understanding that the math is correct, because how else do you shape and knit when we're making shaping and sizing all at the same time, making the fabric, shaping the fabric, sizing the fabric. It's all sort of with 2 sticks and some string, mathematical. All right, next. So here is another way to do that. And it's identical to the way you just did for the increases. And that is, okay, I want to leave 5, or I want to make sure that I get everything in. So I'm going to take 5 away from the 100. And I'm not going to be doing a decrease on my last stitch. So here again, it's every 6th and every 7th. But they sort of reverse when we use the common denominator, where we get 1 7 to 2 6s here. We have a math check. We also have everything circled with colors that match, so that you understand, what number gets multiplied by what. So we have 6 times, we're going to decrease times, on the 6, we're going to do it 10. And then we have on the 7th, 5. And so we get 15 stitches into the 95, and then at the end, we're going to add those extra 5 stitches. And if we look at the bottom, it explains it to us. So we're going to do knit 5, knit 2 together. That's with 7. We're going to do that 1 time, and then knit 4, knit 2 together. We're going to do that 2 times. That's our ratio. Repeat that 5 times. So here we're telling you again that, we're putting that to let you know, the brackets there, that 7 stitches are going to be reduced to 6, and that 6 stitches are going to be reduced to 5 in this knit 4, knit 2 together scenario. So we add it up again. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 5 times 2 is 10, and then, 16 times 5, it's going to give us 80, and then we have the plus 5, so we've come down to those 85 stitches at the end of the day from that 100. So then let's see the next runoff, how we're running that out, to let you understand that. And we show you that if we start off with the full count again, then we're adding up to 100, and then we tell you what the stitch count is as we're augmenting. After the decreases are done and we've taken away, it's not 7 7 6, it's like 6 5 5, because the ratio of the ratios. We're doing that 5 times, and it tells us that we're going to have 85 stitches on the needles. So we can go to the next page. So now if we put it into real time, then we have a sleeve schematic. And on the sleeve schematic, it is, we're starting with 10 inches at the bottom, which is 26 centimeters, and then we're going to have 20 inches at the top, and that's 51 centimeters. But we have 52 stitches at the bottom. That's the biggest thing. We have 102 stitches at the top, which means that we have 50 stitches that we have to increase between the bottom and the top, meaning between the cuff and the upper arm. So we're going to take that 50. We know we're going to put 25 on each side. Pretty much, we're increasing on two sides of that sleeve. So we're going to divide the 50 in half, and we're going to have 25 on each side. We're going to divide that 25 into the number of rows that we're going to increase over. So going back to saying that you never want to go all the way to the top, you want to get to the point where you need that width, and then you want to work even at that width for comfort. We're going to start with, we need 18 inches. That's what we want in our sleeve as a total length. However, we want to work 2 inches even at the top. So here, we're going to start with 126 rows. What we'd like to do is to work 14 of those rows even, and then we're going to work 112 of those rows where we're going to shape it. So we're going to divide that 25 into 112. It's just that simple. Bigger number, smaller number, divide it in half, divide it into the total number of rows. So let's go to the next page. All right, so we've got that, and then to the next page. And here you go. So it's telling us that on every fourth row, we're going to increase 1 stitch on each side. We're going to do that 13 times. Then on every fifth row, we're going to increase 1 stitch on each side. And that's the way we can intersperse it. And so we want to create a common denominator, again, so that we can get an even interspersing. So we take 1 and we hold it from the 13. It's the same thing that we've done before. Now we're just doing it on everything. And so it's going to give us a 1-to-1 ratio. And so here we have our initial math. And so it's 4 times 13 is 52, and then 5 times 12, 60, tells us that we're going to cover 25 stitches, 112 rows. And then here, once we have the ratio, it's going to be the same. It's going to be 4 times 12, give us 48, and 5 times 12 is going to give us 60. That's the 1-to-1 ratio, 12 and 12. But then we held one aside. Those stitches, rows didn't disappear. We just held them out. We're going to put them back in. And so then 4 times 1 is going to give us the 4, and 108 plus the 4 that we add back in is going to give us the 112. This tells us exactly how we're going to work. So the written instructions would say cast on 52 stitches, increase 1 stitch at each end of the 4th row, then at each end of the following 5th row, 12 times, giving us 102 stitches. Then work even for until the piece measures 18 inches. And so let's just let's move. That should be 112 stitches. Here we have the run out on the ratio tool, and that will tell you what's happening each time, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th. That's the way we're interspersing till we get to 12. Then again, continuing, and you're seeing the row numbers augment till we get to 112, and that we've got 25 stitches that have been added. Or what? 25 stops, I always say, that we've made along the way, adding stitches on both sides. Okay, so next, all right, so here we go. We can keep going. So that's the sleeve exercise. It's the same exercise, same thing, except this time we may want to come back each time to the front of the fabric. And this happens, or the back of the fabric. You can plan however you want to do that. You do that by simply dividing the number of rows in half. And what that does is take out one set of rows, either even side, meaning right side or wrong side. So each time, instead of, if you're going and you're interspersing, we know that odd numbered rows are right side rows and even numbered rows are wrong side rows. So if you're interspersing 4 and 5, it means one time you're going to make your increases on a right side row, and one time you're going to make your increases on a wrong side row. If you want to make your increases or your decreases, whatever you're doing, if you want to make those always on the same side, let's go back. Quinn, we need to back up. Okay, great. Let's hang out there for a moment. We need to come forward one, and we need to stay here for a minute. If
Sorry,
you want,
my mouse started going crazy. Apologies.
that's okay. If you want to do everything on the same side, then you see that we have 25, that hasn't changed. We have 112, that hasn't changed. However, we're going to divide that 112 rows in half. And so we're only going to be looking at 56 of those rows that we're actually going to be making any kind of change on, whether increasing or decreasing. So it'll go in 2 times. We still have the setup on the formula the same way, where you're going to add 1. So it's always going to be 2 and 3. If it was 3, it would be 3 and 4, whatever. Here it's 2 and 3. I always multiply it by 2 because I need to remind myself of everything. I don't, I've got a lot of patterns going on at the same time. I don't want to make a mistake on one. So I have 2 times 2 gives me 4. So I know that's going to be every 4th row. I'm getting a 3 as the answer, and 3 times 2 is going to tell me every 6th row. So every 4th row, 19 times, every 6th row, 6 times. You can also not put the flying numbers at the top. You can simply say, leave it with the 2 and the 3, and it would be every second right side row, or every second wrong side row, whichever one you want to stay on. Then you would be doing that 19 times, and then every third right side row 3 times. And so for me, just to be able to see every 4th row and every 6th row makes it easier. And we follow the same logic. Once you do it once, it'll just keep going. So I want to get, a common denominator because I want to intersperse a certain way. And so I have 19 here, I have 6 here. Okay, so I take 1 away from the 19. 6 will go into both. That's the common denominator. Whatever I'm doing, I'm going to repeat that 6 times. And the ratio is going to be 1, 6 every 6th row to 3 every 4th row. I see that. So here, the initial math check was 4 times 19, 76, and 6 times 6, 36, which gave me the 25 stitches being added over the 112. And then here, when I put the ratio in, then I've held 1 aside again to bring that 19 down to 18. So then I have 4 times 18, and then 6 times 6, and that will bring me to 108 rows worked, and I add that 4, which lets me know that I've worked 125 stitches on each side over 112 rows. Okay, then I'm just going to work even until the piece measures 18 inches, and then I'm going to shape the cap. So we can go to the next one, next slide. This is a run out of it just to check to see, the row numbers that I'm making the increases on. This is the first way that we did it. And we see the interspersing of 4, 5, 4, 5. And so we know odd, even. And then here we have all even. We have 4, and we have the ratio. We have 4, 4, 6, 4, 4, 6. And so every 4th, 4th, 6th. And this runs us out and lets us see exactly, when we get to 112 and exactly what the number of stitches that have been added and what the numbers are. Everything is here. It's like at one glance you can check and see right away if there's a mistake or exactly how you work that. You can come back in a year and look at it and say, I may want to make that garment again. What did I do? How did I do that? And you'll sit down and study it yourself and then be able to put it all back. I always say find a drawer in your head and reload. So next. All right, so that's the end of the ratio for increase, the tool, which is the increasing and decreasing formula. If you turn to the back of Knitwear Design Workshop, I have about, I guess, 8 or 9 different ways of using it for adding buttonholes, for all sorts of things. Because there, of course, you also will have a length of fabric, and then you'll have maybe a button band that's going to be a different length. And how do you pick up? So you can easily use the ratio tool if you're going in a circle, and how do you pick up? There are different ways many different ways that you can use the ratio tool. Sometimes if you're doing an asymmetrical V where one side's going to open up more quickly than the opposite side, then you do one side with the ratio tool, you do the second side with the ratio tool. Same number of rows, however, one's going to open up at a different, moving at a different pace. And so that's that. Here, there are calculations on just how to calculate how much yarn you need using square inches. Also, I talked about Joan's comment yesterday in the Ravelry group where she talks about this is inches and using just measurements. She talks about using weight, and it's the same, pretty much the same, and you can take a look at that. This will be a part of your handouts. And can I go to the next page? Yeah, and it continues on just, using your swatch, the square inches in your swatch, and then determining how many swatches you need to make your garment, and then determining how many yards of yarn you need and how many yards per ball and what that means in terms of the number of balls of yarn or skeins of yarn that you would need. So this will walk you completely through that. And then the next. We can go to the next page. All right, so this is just a look that I'll end with at some of the things when I talk about pattern flow and planning your pattern and planning your garment and how important it is, because remember, it is visual stimulation. It is our handmade artwork. And so we all take pride in that. And here, when we look at the picture, this was my Oriole lace blouse, and it was on the cover of the Knitted Lace book by Interweave. And on that, we see that when she puts her arms down, that the pattern runs directly across from the arms to the body on the same row. And that all is depending on where you start your set-in sleeve. And so this is a set-in sleeve. It's also a double tapered body, and it has the high neck. And here at the neck, you see also how it's picked up so that the pattern continues. And the next page. Okay, so here we also take a look at that, and you see very closely her standing with her arm down. So again, you get a real chance to see up close. And they took so many pictures of this, I was pretty surprised and sitting there shaking like, oh God, did I make a mistake that they got a big picture of? But here we've got just a flow there, and also in the back where we have the back placket to see just how everything lines up and how it all lines up side by side and how the patterns flow out from that center placket. Okay, next. And here we see again another close-up that they took, and you see when her arm is there and it's bending just above the bend, you really get a picture of how the pattern flows across from the sleeve and across the front of the body. But on the left-hand side of the screen, you get to see the planning where the center of that leaf comes down into the center between the two shoulder seams, and how important it is to plan where your shoulders are going to be seamed with the pattern. And then that shoulder seam runs down into the center of the leaf. That is the first leaf going into the upper arm, the part of the upper arm of the sleeve, and that you see the half leaves on both sides of that. So that's just a way of saying how important it is and how proud we can be when we look at our work and we've taken the time to really plan it. So that's it. That's pretty much, I think, next page, if there is one. That's it. That's the end of the presentation. So I will come back and just answer any questions that any of you have.
Shirley, there was a question about knitting flat versus knitting in the round. And I know you had answered this previously, but maybe you want to address it again.
Okay, so what was the question?
So can we write the pattern? Do we have to write the pattern flat, or can we write the pattern knitted in the round?
Oh, so here for the DAL, we're asking you to write the pattern flat. We're asking you to write the pattern knitting from bottom to top and we're asking you to write the pattern so that we're knitting flat, so that we're all on the same page. And saying that is like saying take a trip around the world, because there's so many different things that you can do with you see that, and any of you've looked at my work, you look on Ravelry, you know, there's so many of my patterns that are classic body, double taper, and all done bottom to top, and most of them, not all of them, some of them are knitted around, and you see in my book I tell you how to knit around, how, and if you're on my my Craftsy class, you see I tell you how to plan top down, all that. You know, there we have those skills. But in this particular DAL, I would love to have to just see how everyone's minds work differently with a set of parameters.
There's a couple of other questions. So Kathleen wants to know, can you use a round yoke? I kind of think you answered, but maybe you want to say it again.
Yeah, I think I answered, and that is that I would really like you to plan a classic garment. That would be my preference, actually, in terms of what I'd like to see. And what's the purpose of the DALs? Why am I doing all of this? It's to really showcase different creative minds looking at sort of the same thing and taking it in their own directions, and even doing it in a similar way, but having it all really be very different. And if those of you who have read through duets, I mean, it's just amazing. For me, it's amazing each time I look to say what came into my mind and what came into the minds of all the others. And the other thing you have to consider too is that, you know, we have 4 coaches, and I'm coaching as well. And we have, you know, almost 100 of you. And so, you know, we need to be able to work through with you, and it's you know, very much hands-on. And those of you who've gone through the previous design alongs, you understand that they're very much custom and talking to you and walking with you. So, you know, we're just trying to make it so that everybody can you know, knit and get done in the time frame. And so, and also that we are all able to take a look at how we may be able to start together, everybody doing the backs, and then some people will do cardigans, some people will do pullovers, and then moving into the fronts, and all of us just moving along at a similar pace and having similar experiences, although going down very different tracks, looking at the same end result, which is finishing our garments and then also using, you know, these different patterns. I hope I've answered that question.
Shirley, Inbal wants to know, in the Oriel pullover that you just showed, does it flow that beautifully in all the sizes?
I hope so. I did the grading, so I grade my own patterns, and so I try to pull them out, and that's one thing that is so important, and that is, and lots of times, you know, people make them in all different sizes, of course. The thing that's important is that you look at a way, how is that going to break? And if the pattern won't break beautifully at the sides in each size, then I will add a different pattern, usually. Always, really. Or I will grade it for 2 sizes, maybe small, medium, medium, large, if that's I'm not going to break the beauty of the pattern. Sometimes if you look at my Tige cardigan, you'll see that I did the shaping and the twisted rib. Trudy was the knitter on that. You see that big collar? I think she's still having nightmares about it. But it was breaking, how do we break that pattern or make that beautiful? And so what I was able to do was to increase in the twisted rib and just keep the beauty of the pattern stitch running. And like I said also at the top, if my pattern stitch won't break in a way that I'm going to be happy, if I shape the shoulders, I won't shape the shoulders. It's going to shape on my body. I want that beauty there, and I'm not going to destroy that beautiful pattern stitch to do that. So it's all about whatever we put out, you know, making sure that we're happy about it and that we're proud when we see it. I don't want to say, oh God, I don't want to see that one again. You know, you just really want to always be proud. That Oriel lace blouse was 2007. You know, people are still making it. You know, my wedding dress was 2007. I can't believe it that people are still getting married in it. Lisa knit that one. People are still sending me photographs. Lisa's probably still having nightmares about that too. It was a very complex piece, but beautiful. And a lot of brides from around the world, Japan, where was in Ireland, all over, have gotten married in that. But, you know, all these years later, I am very, very proud of that. And that's what we want to do. We're making heirloom pieces, in my mind. That's what my world is all about.
Diane would like to know if raglans are acceptable.
Set-in sleeve or dropped. Classic body or double taper body. And the classic body, you can see that silhouette. And next week I'm doing the double taper. You can see that silhouette in KDW. Also, you can see the double taper body. So raglans are not what we're doing.
And Aaliyah had a question about looking as a square from the center out, not bottom up or top down. So again, I think that what you said before is an answer to that question.
And we'll have other DALs. I mean, who knows what we'll do in the next DALs. You know, in past DALs, we've done all sorts of things. You know, like you saw Ellen's pattern running off to the sides. You've seen dresses. There are lots of different things. So, we'll, you know, who knows what we'll do next time. We may do horizontal. You know, I teach a horizontal class as well. You know, knitting where your rows become your width and your stitches become your length. You know, there are lots of different ways to make this fabric. But this is where we are right now in this particular DAL.
I have a quick question. Can I unmute? Is that okay?
So sure.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I found this to be super helpful. I have a really quick, hopefully, question. When you take your swatch and you're measuring that, should you give it a little tug, or should you kind of just should I just be doing this whoop and then putting it down and then measuring it? Like, how do I know that I'm getting the accurate measurements?
Well, usually you want to do something with your swatch. I mean, you want to block it in some way. And,
yes, yep.
And then you just want to lay it flat, unless it has a drip length, which I talk about in KDW. If you're using a fabric that will expand, then you want to take a flat and then a hanging. You want to let it hang for a little bit, and then you want to take that measurement as well, and you want to average those. But if you have a recovering type of yarn, like merino or some kind of a yarn that's got wool in it, it's like your hair, it'll bounce back, then you just want to block your swatch, and that's going to be your measurement. Let it lay flat, and that's it.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I did block, and then it did get a little smaller, after I took the pins out. So I think I'll just remeasure.
Yeah, just measure, let it sit for a day or two, and then take the measurements again, and then that would be your starting. Because once you lay the measurements out, and then the other thing is that I always say, you know, after you knit 5 inches, measure everything again, because then you are actually working on a piece that is the way you're holding it. Sometimes we have a swatch that's small, and it is not going to be worked the same way we would be working if we were working a bigger swatch. 4 inches, we're not going to hold it the same way we're holding 20 inches or 18 inches. And sometimes your gauge will change. We're not a machine. And if that happens, then you've got a real look at what you really are, because you've got all the stitches on the needles, and then exactly what you're going to get. And, you know, there's no guessing, because that's what you've done. And 5 inches is not terrible if you have to rip it out. And so that's what I say. Take another one, make sure that you're holding gauge on exactly the width you're going to be working on, and exactly, you know, the number of stitches and your pattern stitch and all that. And where you're comfortable working, all that will happen on that bigger piece once you start. Just take the 5 inch measurement.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Inbal wants to know if there is a color palette that you've chosen And maybe you want to talk about yarn selection when that's going to be announced too, because there was a question about that as well.
Yeah, well, the yarn selections, we've already selected the yarns from the different suppliers. And so we'll be telling you a little bit more about that. The color palette, we were assigned a color palette to start with. And then we've gotten all these swatches coming in. They're so gorgeous. And so they've said they will work with us. So we will be telling you pretty much, what we want. For those of you who are competing, for those of you who are not competing, you can use whatever you want. You can use whatever yarn you want. You can use whatever color you want. But for those of you who are competing, there will be some parameters, but that will be forthcoming. And I know you're doing a color piece, and so that will be very important for you. Okay. Anybody else?
I had a quick question about if you're competing, is it a woman's garment that's required, or can we do men's small?
Who's talking to me? I can't see. I've got the gallery view up, but anyway, you can do women or men, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Are there anything that any of the coaches want to add? Joan, Mari, Lisa, Trudy, Tracy, you want to say something, moderator? We've had a lot of exchanges going on, and the swatches, everybody's posting the swatches, just beautiful. And I think it's just inspiring everybody, certainly inspiring me. And it's like one after another. I've like an embarrassment of riches in terms of what my eyes are seeing. But if anyone wants to ask another question about, as you start to begin planning your garments now, you've done the swatches, all of you have swatched before. And so now you're going into some perhaps uncharted territory. And that will be laying out the schematics and making certain that they're correct. And we're here with you, but we'll give you some places to look up, and KDW is a great reference for that. It took me 2 years to write the book. I think I lost 10 years off my life doing it. I kept seeing new gray hair every morning, but it was, there's a lot of information in there, and I had been, doing a lot of things before I felt I had the knowledge to be able to write that, and made a lot of mistakes and made a lot of corrections, taught a lot of classes, learned a lot. And so there's a lot of information that will be helpful if you have questions there, and then of course on the forum, and then we're here as well. So
yeah, I would just echo Shirley's comments on this, being able to come log into Ravelry after a very busy day and seeing all the beautiful swatches that were out there. I usually take an hour just to de-stress, and I usually go to Ravelry and just browse. So I appreciate all the work everyone's done and posting their swatches out there as well. Shirley, there was a question about whether or not the non-competitors can share their progress on social media.
Yeah, well, the non-competitors pretty much, they're pretty much okay to do that. They're going to be putting them on Ravelry as well. But I think if any of you are going to be, this is your work, right? There are a lot of people out there who are very clever. And, if you want to sell your pattern or something in the future, you may see it before you want to sell it. If you put it out there. And so we try to be protective of you. That's why we've asked those of you who are competing not to send in your, not to post your sketches. And so we're asking most of you just to post your swatches. And that is your intellectual property, but I'm telling you that you could very well see it. And look, someone says, this looks wonderful. And then, if you want to sell it also, if you want to go to a magazine and someone else has already published it, you're going to have to prove that that's yours.
This happened before.
And on Ravelry with one of our groups, that's why we've become and that was the second DAL, we've become very protective of protecting all of you and what you send in and what you may want to do with those pieces in the future. So, you want
Jamie has her hand up?
But it just depends on what you want to do. I'm sorry, Tracy, what'd you say?
Jamie has her hand up.
Okay, Jamie, just talk. You can just everybody's unmuting. Just like join the conversation.
Sorry, I already asked my question about the men's women. I forgot to put my hand down. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'll just add as a designer, it is so tempting as we're knitting and finishing that to want to share what we're doing in post, but we just can't because of the fact that we can't, it can't be shown until it is published where, when it's purchased and then then photographed and then published. But you see other people posting their work. It's mostly when they're knitting other people's patterns, and then they're posting, their work of other people's patterns. But when it's your own work, you are designing yourself. That it's hard not to want to share it, but you really have to just keep it personal and to yourself. Share it with your friends.
Until you're ready to sell or do whatever you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, because it is tempting also when you look around on the internet and say, oh, that's really pretty, I'd love to copy that. Oh, I think I can do that sleeve. Oh yeah, that's also tempting too for people if it's beautiful. And so you have to just keep that in mind now that you are crossing the bridge into becoming a designer.
Shirley, I wanted to ask about the measurements, because at the beginning we have the table of measurements. And if we're doing it for us, it's not a problem. But if we're doing it for the competition and we need a small size,
right.
So like if I want a certain, I want it to be in a certain height, but I don't have the measurement to measure.
That would be your decision. And what the yarn company is going to do is they're going to expand it. When I first started designing, they made me do my own grading. So they would say, okay, we want that in size small, medium, large, extra large, extra, extra large. That's it. I'm like, okay. And so then I have to lay out all my worksheets, size small, medium, large. All you guys have to do is size small. And if you want that to follow through for the rest of your garment, you may be able, you can put that on, like you just want this particular height. But I mean, you have to focus. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question on what
I think what she's asking is what are the parameters of the dimensions for the size small that they would be designing for?
I think in the back of my book, did you not find it? When Maury posted the other day?
And so do we have all the measurements that you showed, and all the measurements for the table that you showed for size small?
In the Crafts Yarn Council, that's the measurements for designing. I think that's in the back of the book. You should have all the measurements there that you need.
Okay.
Goes from a baby to, goes men's, women's. I think it's all back there. Those are pretty much standard.
I think he's talking about the measurement lady.
The measurement lady is if you're measuring for yourself. The people who are competing are not using measurement lady. The people who are in the classic, one of the things about the classic DAL is that everyone had to try on their garments. Because the one big problem that I've always been focused on is that so many people say, oh, my grandmother made me this, my aunt made me this sweater, and it never fit. And that's like on and on and on, because people just follow the gauge and maybe they don't get it, maybe voila, and oh, this is okay. So it's always been, take your measurements or the measurements of the person you're making that garment for, and we want to make sure that as you're going through the DAL that you are holding gauge, keeping measurements, being made aware of that, and that what you finish fits. So that is for the people who are in the classic DAL, who are going to try on their garments and show us their garments as they're being, as they finish. For the people who are in Vogue Knitting or go in the competition to go there, you're going to be working like a designer. I'm not making things for me when I'm designing. I'm making things for the world. And so I'm making in a size small and grading to a medium, large, extra large, up to a size 50 or 60 bust. And so you're going to be working in that way where you're designing a size small based on the measurements there, and manipulating your pattern and doing whatever to fit into those measurements. Then a technical editor is going to take that and they're going to grade it up to the larger sizes, because Vogue has a big audience and everybody's not a size small, but it's a good place to start because then they can see the lengths, the widths, the dimensions, all that, and they can take, mathematically take those garments to the larger sizes. Okay? Any more questions? Okay, so we are at the 2 hour and 15-minute point. We got the whole presentation in 2 hours. Hallelujah. I'm not good at that. So if there are no other questions, then I'll say have a, for those of you in the Northeast, hope you don't have to shovel out too much. We're having just a wonderful snow day here. And for the rest of you, have a good weekend and just enjoy the journey.
Thank you, Shirley.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Mari can say goodbye in Japanese if they're in Japanese people. Okay.
Thanks, Shirley. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Okay.